I'm Robin Myrick, I'm your instructor, and let's start, thank you. Let's start by just kind of going around and telling everyone your name, why you decided to take the course, and, what your experience with grant writing is, if any. Start here.
You're wrong seat. I'm Jessica McGahee, and I have worked in nonprofits, and I have a degree in nonprofits, but I have never took a grant writing course, and I always felt like it was kind of like a gaping hole in that. And so I really enjoy writing. I've taken another class and some seminars with writing workshop here. So I just saw this, and I just kind of saw it as an opportunity to kind of round that out a little bit.
Okay, what type of nonprofit do you have?
Well, right now I am not working. I stay home with my kids, so I was going to kind of look at getting back into. I work for colleges, I work for universities, and I am hoping to kind of like maybe pick up something freelance or to do part time or to something I could kind of do from home sometimes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I'm Karen Pruitt. I'm also a stay-at-home mom, but I am on the board of the Crackle of Dallas. It's a nonprofit that is for arts communities, so fine arts, all sorts of arts. And we need money. So there's none of the current board members have a lot of experience on grant writing. I've never written one. I have friends who've done it. But I wanted to learn the basics and see if I can start getting us, get applications in for us.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. You guys, I guess if you're the one that's going to be doing it, you don't have a grant writer on staff.
We do not.
You don't hire one or things like that.
We have no money to hire one.
Ah.
Yeah, we need help.
Well, see, this is perfect for you. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
Next.
Hi, my name is Tamara Warner. I'm here because I'd like to know more about the basics of grant writing. I don't have experience in it. I do come from a family of people that do this in the world of education. The reason why I'm interested in it is because I do have my own interest in creating a nonprofit, and I also belong to other nonprofits that, like you were saying, they need funding, and we do receive grants from other, like for DeSoto and places like that, but we need extra money so that we can continue to put on programs and be able to bring people in to give us the information that we need from them.
Right. Okay, thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Reggie. I'm the other half.
Okay.
I'm a CPA, so I have an accounting background and business and so forth. So I'm just really just here, just learning what I can just about grant writing itself. So.
Well, I have to tell you, I am so excited to have a CPA. Grant writing fundamental is like probably the first course where I've had one because, you know, what a lot of people miss is that financials are
do technical writing professionally. I work for an IT company in Plano. I just started volunteering as the grants coordinator for the Love Pit, which is a pit bull type rescue for dogs. And I know nothing about grant writing, so that's why I'm here.
well, excellent. You will when we're done.
Awesome.
Next.
My name's Casey, and I've come to a few other things, but I stayed at home for a long time with my kids. I have 4, and now they're in school, and I actually am teaching at a really small private school, and we make money.
Right.
So this would be something that I could provide to the school.
Okay, great. And
I'm Jenny. I'm also a technical writer, and I work on fiction outside of that, but started doing some more volunteer work at our company, and this appealed to me because I have a writing background, and I thought, well, let it look more now.
yeah, and it's a good skill to add to your, your arsenal if you are writing for hire too. Okay, well, as I said, I'm Robin. I worked in nonprofits I don't currently work in nonprofits. I'm a doctoral student and a college professor and a teacher of writing. But I worked in nonprofits for 20 years. I'm still very much involved in mentoring nonprofits and kind of sort of helping folks bridge that gap in terms of grant training and grant writing and sort of understanding the whole grant process. And, you know, I myself have raised about 14 million, a little more, for nonprofits in Texas. You know, and I spent a lot of my grant writing career in Austin, and I've worked for everyone from, you know, the biggest nonprofits working on the national scene, like Texas Council on Family Violence, to like the smallest nonprofits with a budget of $10,000 or less and one employee who doesn't pay themselves. You know, really kind of at any level that you're working, I'm a big believer in the, you know, teach a man to fish, teach a woman to fish sort of thing, that it's, you know, a lot of time we kind of, well, and in my experience as a grant writer, being hired as a grant writer, a lot of times people sort of, you know, think they can do it, kind of hand over that, you know, I don't have that knowledge, I'm just going to hand it to someone else, and my expectation is, like, the way they write the grant and everything they do is going to be perfect and save us, and it has nothing to do with how our organization is set up, you know, how we're structuring our programs, what our financials look like, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like even if you don't end up being the person writing grants in your organization, being able to kind of communicate what the grant writer's role is, what grant writer can and cannot accomplish for your organization, and just sort of, you know, demystify how the whole funding process works in terms of what funders are looking for, why you might get screened out, what kinds of opportunities are not going to be worth your time based on where you're at, and, you know, what a match actually is and what it really looks like, especially for small organizations. So, let me kind of try and cover all of that in the next 3 hours, and also do some, you know, hard scrabble work on the actual writing of the grants. That is what I'm here to. So, let's see, we have
I don't know how it worked. It just, we kept plugging in the same stuff. So.
try turning it on and off again, yeah. I'm going to bring the lights down a little bit. Because we have, let's see. Can you all see that well enough? What, would you like it a little darker, or is that all right?
I think it's okay.
That's fine? Okay. All right, so this is the rundown of what we're going to kind of go through and cover today. Grants and their purpose, grant-making agencies, entities, and organizations, matching the need or request to available funding sources, the 6 essential questions all grants ask and answer, a very important part. Making the actual ask and making the argument. Argument strategy is something we're going to really work on today too. Funder priorities and decision making, the 5 most common rookie mistakes, which even if you're going to become the best grant writer in the world, the chances are you may make some of these mistakes along the way, but this is how you learn. And also quick tune-ups for grant writers for exercises you can use to sort of generate and refine ideas, get past sort of blocks, deal with difficult questions that you just don't know how to answer, which will always come up, that kind of stuff. So, and hello to the live streaming folks. If you have a question, please feel free to text me, 512-743-2160, and we'll add it to the conversation. All right. Grants and their purpose. So, just at the most fundamental level, what is a grant? We all have a concept of what it is, but, at its most basic, it's a competitive opportunity for funding. Emphasis on the word competitive. Grants are targeted to specific individuals, groups of people, types of organizations, et cetera, et cetera. The more that you read grant guidelines and do grant writing, the more you learn how focused these organizations are and who they want to give to, who they may not, what they want to give for, that kind of stuff. Very, very often grants are targeted to a specific geographic location, a state, a city, a neighborhood, a zip code. you know, or a certain cultural group, a certain purpose, you know, for the arts, for the education, for this type of underserved population, for that type of underserved population. And grants are made for a variety of purposes and to address a variety of needs, from programs and services to staff salaries, building projects, creative projects, or public awareness campaigns. And these days, it's really more difficult than it's ever been, at least in my time writing grants, to shake loose unrestricted funds that you can do with what you want. I mean, that's like, you have to have someone in the room at the board meeting to get that a lot of times. And also, you know, what's called, you know, indirect cost or overhead, like, you know, salaries. Like if there's a portion, you know, the thing that I always had to do when I was a program manager is just figure out a way to make this percentage of a person's time dedicated to my grant so I could put their one part of their salary in order, you know, that way. You know, the thing that funders definitely don't look upon very favorably are organizations who, you know, kind of sort of don't bother to mask the fact that they're, you know, they're presenting a great program, but what they really need to do is fund their overhead. And there are also expectations, you know, some funders also have expectations that they will or they will not tell you directly in terms of the amount of, you know, indirect costs or overhead costs that an organization is allowed to have. The Association of Fundraising Professionals generally says, you know, organizations that have 20 to 25%, maybe maximum, of their budget dedicated to indirect costs are doing great. And that's much harder to do in reality, you know, than it seems. And, you know, if you look at a lot of sort of the big charities out there that have gotten themselves in trouble with funders in the last, you know, say, decade or so, a lot of it comes down to that, you know. Funders want to give money for a specific purpose that they can see. They want to see their money in action, right? It's not necessarily sexy for them to fund the accountant, unless the accountant is integral to doing this grant project. So, you know, part of grantsmanship is also kind of knowing, reading between the lines and getting to know these sort of unspoken rules and expectations that can affect whether your proposal makes it past the slush pile or whether it gets funded. Grant guidelines in general will outline eligibility criteria and provide information to those wishing to make a proposal. I brought examples of 4 different types of grant guidelines that we'll look at today. They really vary widely. There is no, dear grant maker, make your guidelines this way so all, you know, prospective applicants can understand them. Some folks are much better than others. These days also, like if you go to, say if you go to a corporate giving website, a lot of times they'll have, take this eligibility quiz to make sure that you qualify for a grant from our, you know, foundation or whatever. And I think that's great because that's kind of something that never used to be the case. It helps you not waste your time, helps them not waste their time getting, you know, a mountain of proposals that really don't go towards what they want. So if you see something like that, that's the first place in the guidelines to look, to see if you're even in that group that's eligible. Okay, let's talk about grants or not. And we talked about this a little bit. They are not free money with no strings attached. Do you remember that guy that used to have the infomercial, the grant guy that used to wear the suit with the question marks all over it saying, you can get a free grant to start your business, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, that was a very difficult time in my grant mentoring career because I had so many people like, but I saw this thing on TV and I want to start a business. You know, it's like, no, it doesn't actually work that way. Funders will have restrictions, they will have expectations. And many funders will not hesitate to pull grant funding or to never fund you again if you put a foot wrong in this regard. Because most grants come with the expectations that you will evaluate how you spent the funds, that you'll file a report, that there will be some sort of deliverable that gives them, that allows them to go to, you know, their community and say, hey, we did this good, look at this good thing we did, look at, you know, how far this money went, et cetera, et cetera. Never underestimate the PR value of this little chunk of money that folks are giving you. They most often want something in PR-wise for that chunk of money. Grants are not easy to get. Grant applications are competitive. And, you know, kind of depending on who you're targeting, you know, whether it's a foundation or whether it's a government grant or things like that, the level of competition and kind of knowing the level of competition and what, you know, what the grant maker considers competitive, not necessarily what we consider competitive, but what they do. The things that they need to know, to see, to put your application at the top of the pile instead of somewhere in the middle, at the bottom, or in the trash can. Grants are not generally available to organizations without government certified nonprofit status, such as the 501c3. There are other versions of nonprofit status, but this is mostly under eligibility requirements. You will see nonprofit organizations holding 501c3. And this is aside from merit-based grants, such as those to go to artists, writers, or other individuals. They have their own requirements. They don't require that you be a nonprofit organization, but they also usually require that you demonstrate, you know, like, I want a grant to do this, I want a grant to start a writing school, like Writing Workshop Dallas, for the benefit of the community. They're still going to require some evidence that you've done that, you can do that, you have the credentials to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So there is always this level of proof and demonstration built into any grant process. Grants are not generally available for starting a nonprofit or business, as we talked about, because funders expect to see a track record. They want to see demonstration of your capability, your responsible use of funds, things like that. Oh, I didn't close my parentheses. Sorry about that. They want to know these things. What I always recommend for folks that are thinking of starting a nonprofit or are a new nonprofit that doesn't have a track record, even if you have some donors and funders, you know, that are already contributing to the project, and grants is just one piece of that. Most funders don't want to, you know, don't want to be the only chunk of money that funds something you do, if they can help it, unless you have worked out a relationship with them where this is a special initiative, it's going to be branded as your special initiative, you know, we're going to do this great thing and you're going to get all the credit for it, stuff like that. You know, what I recommend for new and emerging nonprofits and people that want to start a nonprofit is to work with an umbrella organization. An organization that already has, a nonprofit that already has good standing in the community, a good track record of working with grants, their 501c3, and then you can apply it under their 501c3 as a project of their organization. This is also a good way to kind of learn the ropes in terms of, you know, how to work with other organizations, because collaboration is huge for funders. They like collaboration, they like partnerships. So if you can work with another nonprofit, you know, you submit the grant, you know, basically they're submitting the grant. You may be writing it, you may be doing the work. They'll probably get some sort of, you know, they'll probably get the chunk of administration that comes from the grant. A pass-through is kind of what we call that. But it's a good way to get started. It's really, I think, the best way to get started when you're trying to get your feet wet into getting grants and doing them and knowing what that looks like. And these umbrella organizations can also be great in terms of advice and support and really helping you figure out how to do what it is you want to do the right way. Also, grants are not generally meant to be used for purposes or expenses other than what the applicant has outlined in the grant proposal. This is something that that I've come up against a lot in my grant writing career and mentoring career, in terms of, you know, there is an ethical standard for grantsmanship, for giving and receiving money, and for how you use it. Sadly, you know, you may know of nonprofits, you may work for nonprofits that, you know, apply for grants and then take the money and go do something else with it, and think there are no consequences to that. And maybe there have been consequences to that. But that's just not the way. That's just not the way we do it. And as I mentioned previously, you know, if someone that's giving you money, you know, ever finds out, you know, that can be bad for you. And that can also, you know, especially with local foundations, like, and the ladies who lunch that are on the boards of all the local foundation, these folks know each other. So, you know, you do one foundation wrong and you may find out other foundations suddenly know about it and suddenly you can't get funding from them either. So, that's just one reason. Okay. So, when we get further into this, any questions so far? Okay. I am kind of going to barrel through the PowerPoint stuff so we can kind of get to putting some of it in practice and in action. All right, so let's talk about grant-making agencies, entities, and organizations. Who are these people and what do they do and where are they doing it? So grants are made from many different types of funders, including public and private foundations. These include, in Dallas, we have a whole lot of family foundations. And, you know, foundations started by people with money that want to do good in their community. City, county, state, and federal government. Not all of us will apply for all of these types of grants, especially federal grants. They're big and unwieldy. They're generally for, you know, hundreds of $1,000s, adding up to millions of dollars, multi-year projects, broad in scope, broad in benefit, you know, involve putting together a lot of, you know, often involve putting together a sort of collaboration with other partners. And, you know, increasingly, they're more difficult to get to because there's just less federal money for grants than there used to be. But they're out there. City, county, and state funds, you know, they can target any number of things. A lot of city and county funds are very much about providing services to people, serving underserved communities, you know, in some way, sort of adding to whatever a municipality or a county or a state provides in terms of services for certain groups of people. But that's not all. Obviously, we have, you know, state arts funding, city arts funding, and the City of Dallas. One of the City of Dallas's arts funding program is one example of the guidelines that we're going to look at today. Corporations and their community giving programs. Sometimes people forget that you can ask for money from corporations for all kinds of things. And again, here, you know, they're very clear about what they want to fund and what they don't. You know, generally they don't want to be associated with anything controversial or bring any kind of bad press in any way at all, ever. And they are very focused also on sort of, you know, partnering with you in terms of, you know, numbers that will benefit, ensuring that their money goes a long way, and ensuring that they get the PR benefit of how they helped you as well. And arts organization and other specialized funders. You know, there are also organizations that kind of don't fall into any of the first three categories that work with writers, artists, you know, money for performances, give money for other kinds of specialized things, you know, grants that are kind of the result of some sort of merit-based project or competition or something like that. It's a little outside the standard type of grant making. Grant makers may accept proposals all year long. They may accept them only during certain times of the year, or they can accept them on any schedule of their choosing. And just because they offered a grant, you know, if you're, you know, you've applied somewhere one year and you get turned down and you want to apply again the next year, you know, the application deadline may not always come in the same month as the same part of the year. Especially with foundations, they're managing, you know, they're constantly sort of looking at their portfolio of funds, you know, what their funds have done, what they want to do in the next year, and they may even shift their priorities from year to year or even cycle to cycle. What they're funding in August may not be the same thing that they want to focus on in September of their broader scope of this is what we do. So, and we'll get to this too, but this is why it's really important to have a line of communication with a grant maker, through a staff member, through a board member, through any other means that you can get information about what they really want to fund and what they really want to do right now, and sometimes versus what they say. Okay. Important. Matching the need or request to available funding sources. The need and the way you discuss what the need is and the way you roll out that concept and the way you make an argument for it is probably, you know, the most important component of grant application, because it has to be clear to someone who's going to give you money that there is a need to be filled. And believe me, not everyone is going to see the need in the same way that you see it. People that make grants, people that score grants have their own biases, have their own ideas that they bring to the table. They're not just all, perfect, objective people. So you really have to sell them. This is the sales part of grant writing. So, clearly demonstrating the need, understanding what your own concept of need is and how that squares with the funder's potential concept of need. That's critically important. You may remember, like, if you were growing up as a kid and you wanted some money for your parents for something, and you needed it, I need it, and you ever had a mom or dad come back and say, no, you don't need that, you want that, There's a version of that exists in the mind of funders as well, but let's kind of break it down to sort of the different types of need. There is like a compelling need for a service or a program in the community because it does not exist, right? There's a need for something that's supplemental to what already exists, to make it work better, to serve more people, to fill some sort of gap in some way. There's the needs of your organization. We're going to close our doors if we don't get X amount of money to fund this by the end of the year, then there's kind of the rest. So at this point, why don't we kind of talk about, like, in your experience, like needs that you have identified within an organization, needs that you know about in the community that you feel like grant funding could help address, alleviate, et cetera, et cetera. Any of you have sort of specific projects that you've worked on, that you may be working on, things you're thinking about with your organization in terms of this is what we need, this is what we know the community needs? Yes?
Two different ones that I have potential to work with. One is for special needs parents, so that are in rural areas because there is very little help around them.
Right.
So they need to have respite care to get away from the situation for a day, a weekend, a couple hours even. Somebody they can trust to come in and spend with their special needs child so that they can get away and feel that that person's safe and they're not going to be coming home to chaos. The other one is with them being able to take the child out with the rest of the family, to parks, playgrounds and things, and have something that the whole family can do and not sit the kid in them.
Right, so they need, there's a need for respite care for parents. There's a need for qualified and correct people to work with the
They
child.
might be qualified, but they're not all good.
Right, so there's a need, maybe there's a need for a process by which parents can screen people better, or an agency or a program that does that screening for them. What else?
The other one is actually here in Dallas, and it's for a center that helps women who are in domestic violence situations, and she goes around and does a lot of different programs touching base with people
Right.
and teaching, but because everything's out of her own pocket, she is having to work full-time and then doing this, and she needs to find some way to be able to do the books that she's writing and the programs she's putting on, to be able to fund some of that, not out of her pocket,
Right.
so that she can.
So she needs to start a nonprofit.
She's actually been in for a while, but she just doesn't have the time to put into it, but she needs to.
Okay. All right, well, let's start with the idea of helping the special needs kids in rural areas. So, start kind of thinking like a funder here. What are the questions that you would ask yourself about this type of proposal?
What does it cost? What's the population and what does it cost?
Okay, who exactly is the population we're serving? When we say special needs, that's a big tent. I worked in programs for people with disabilities for a decade. So that's, also we have to think about kind of the language we use in terms of how it communicates to a funder, like, do they understand the terminology? This might be the terminology in our field, but does a funder understand this means that? So there we have to sort of really talk about who this is very specifically. There are the kids that need the services, and then there are the parents that need assistance, right? So what other questions come up about this type of project?
Maybe logistically, how are you working it? Is there a person in charge? You then somehow screening everybody? What's the procedure for that?
Right. How would it actually work? Right? Are we talking about funding for an organization, or are you talking about some direct, pass-through funding to parents to hire people? Who's doing the screening? We're in a rural area, right? What is the population of people with disabilities in this rural area, and what?
What's the boundary? Is it a county, or is it like
Yes.
a multi-county population?
Right. Where exactly? How many people with disabilities are in this area? Period. How many of them are special needs kids? A subset. What are the existing services that serve this community, and where is the gap between the existing service and what you're proposing? And also, why is there this gap? That the why part is the part that we often think is the most obvious. Well, we're saying there's a gap, but what makes it a gap? Why is it a problem? Anyone that lives in a rural community doesn't have access to a lot of things that people in cities have, right? So what else? What other questions come up with this?
Even just fundamentally at a playground, what specific pieces of playground equipment for which special need? Because
Right.
if they're in a wheelchair, or if they're in crutches, or if they're having some developmental issues, it's all different needs.
Right, and so here too, let's get into this sort of devil's advocate of how someone in the room might be thinking about a request like this. Oh, different kinds of equipment, that could be expensive. Is that more expensive than the number of people that would, is this cost justified for the number of people that would benefit from it in a rural area? And getting into the parents need respite. Well, of course parents need respite, but if you don't know anybody who has a kid with a disability, if you don't know anybody who has a disability, you may not understand why parents need something like that, or why that's important for them to be able to be a good caretaker the rest of the week, or a good advocate, or whatever else, You may not understand the whole issue about it's very hard for people with disabilities to find a good attendant or a good assistant. Turnover is extremely high in that profession because pay is generally not that great. All this stuff, is not something you can assume that whoever's reading a proposal is going to have the knowledge to understand. So you have to explain it. Part of selling it is really connecting those dots, and oftentimes explaining way more than you may think that you need to in order to help a funder understand exactly what the issue is they're trying to address, exactly why, who it helps, why it's necessary that it costs this much. The fact that, You're not just picking a number out of the air. Here are the real costs associated with it, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the concept of need, it can be very squishy for, you know, beginning grant writers, that's probably the squishiest and maybe the most difficult part to get past, how much you have to do to really demonstrate what the need is. So getting to this next bullet point, if your need does not match a funder's concept, or if it does not match a grant maker's stated criteria for funding, you're likely wasting your time with a proposal. You know, there are the basics. You can look at grant guidelines and miss, oh, it's my county isn't included, or this type of service isn't included, or things like that. You know, that's obvious. That's not going to be a good submission. But, you know, this is where kind of the information that you get from talking to a program officer or a grant maker in some capacity helps, because while they may fund things for people with disabilities, they might fund specifically programs for kids. You know, they might not fund exactly the type of thing you're doing. You know, they may prefer to fund playground equipment instead of any kind of personal services. They might prefer to fund only things that, only services that are directed to the kids in question, not anything that is for the parents. And some of this is reading between the lines, and some of this is asking, but you have to be really sure, so as not to waste your time, that there is enough of a fit that makes it worth it for you to submit a proposal to this grant maker. And this is the really big thing, time spent researching these potential funders and selecting those that are the best match for your need or situation saves you considerable time and money. Time if you're doing it yourself, money if you're hiring somebody else to do it, because I can't tell you how many times I've been hired to, you know, write a grant that very early on I figure out there's no way this organization's going to get it because of some of these things that we've been talking about. It's not a match. There's no way, or it's not a good enough match. You know, it's not a solid match. Maybe you could fall within the parameters. Technically, you qualify. But, you know, the chances of your actually getting it might not be good enough to spend your time doing it. So I really advocate for beginning grant writers especially to write fewer, better targeted grants than 1 million grants to everybody in town. Questions? Well, let's get to questions. Okay, an argument I'm going to make to you today is that there are 6 essential questions that all grants ask and answer. Questions that you need to ask yourself about what you're writing, questions that funders may be asking you, questions that may be in their mind, even if they're not asking you those questions. And you know, if you've been in journalism class or English class, you're probably very familiar with good old who, what, where, when, how, why, right? They're so utilitarian and so ubiquitous that we don't even think about them anymore. But, you know, it is really almost as simple in terms of squeezing it down to those kinds of essential questions. Almost anything a funder could ask you could be turned into a who, what, you know, where, when, how question in terms of what they really want to know, what they're really getting at. So let's look at some examples. I mean, in my previous version of this, I gave, you know, like 2 pages of examples for each question, but I'll give you a taste, and then we'll do a little exercise to kind of work on thinking this way. So, examples of who questions. Who do you serve? Who's your target population? Who's going to benefit from this funding? Who are you counting as part of your constituency? And is the way you're counting them valid, by the way? Who needs these services but can't get them? Who do you partner with in the community? Who else supports the work you do? What kind of services do you provide? What kind of needs exist in your community? What are the obstacles people face in getting their needs met? What makes your work challenging? What other types of funding will match this grant if it's awarded? Match is an increasingly common thing. What will happen to this program when the grant ends? Are we giving you money for a year and then once our money is up, you're not going to do the service anymore? What service gap do you feel that other organizations do not fill? Where will your project take place? Where do your constituents live? Where does the need for services exist? Where will you find other partners to share the cost? And you can kind of see that a lot of these are kind of versions of the same question too, that come around again and again, or that you may be asked in 5 different ways within the same grant application, right? Something that can be really frustrating about grant writing is sometimes funders will get an information they need to know in several different ways with several different questions, and you feel like you're just repeating yourself, and you have to find a way not to. That's something to be prepared for. Where will the building be located? Where will people go for support if funding is denied to you, right? Where can you cut administrative costs? That's one of them. When? When will the building project be finished? When will the services be evaluated? When will the creative project begin and end? When will you seek completion funding? When will you be able to report on the number of people actually participating versus the number that you projected? When will your current funding run out? When will you hire the personnel needed to carry out this project? Will you hire them right away? Will you hire them 6 months into the project? Do things need to happen before we can hire this personnel, etc.? How can be a very tough one too, but how you're going to do all this grand stuff that you're saying you're going to do is very important in terms of selling. How do you know this need exists? Like where are you getting your numbers? How can you quantify this need? Like don't just tell us that the need exists. How many people need it? How can you put it into numbers and that help us translate it to dollars versus numbers? How much am I spending on each person that's going to be helped by this project? They really do think a lot about things like that. How will people learn about the service you provide? How do you plan to promote it? How will you document the project? What are the deliverables you're going to be sending us that, show you're doing exactly what you said you would do? How will the program be evaluated and recertified? Like sometimes if you get a multi-year grant, you need to turn in evaluation, they need to make sure that you're doing what you said you would do before they give you more money for the second year. This is absolutely true of federal grants. You don't just get a big lump up front. It's a year-to-year thing, and if they want to be able to pull that money back if they don't think it's being spent very well, or if you're not doing what you said you would do. How can grant funding address this issue when it's not already being how can throwing money at this issue change it? I mean, we should also not assume that everyone thinks throwing money at an issue is the best solution for change or for making things better, right? How do we know that you're the right organization to meet the challenges presented by this work? How do we know that you're the right ones to do this in this community when there are 5 other agencies in this community that are working in kind of the same area? How do we know you're not duplicating something that already exists? And the big existential why. Why does your project deserve support from the community? Why will the solution you propose solve the problem? Why is your organization more qualified than others? Why can't this issue be addressed with existing resources? Why hasn't this population been able to succeed without assistance? When you're working with underserved services to underserved populations in particular, you have to remember, again, going back to the example of families with disabilities, people who are board members who are going to be reading your proposal may not be acquainted, may not be members of the community you're trying to serve, may not be acquainted with the issues in communities that are not their own. They're not necessarily gonna understand some fundamental things that you understand. Why are these issues so difficult to understand? Why is your application a match for this funding opportunity? Okay, we fund this and that and the other, but why is this a match for what we do? Especially if you're trying to do something that's just not strictly straight on what they say they find, you know. You really need to make that argument why this is a match, like this is the right pairing of this money and you and us. Okay, so, let's see, how are we doing? Do we need a break or anything? Are we all right? Let's see what time it is. Okay. Well, we're kind of at the end of the first hour, so we can still charge ahead. We can take a break. I leave that up to you. So let's do an exercise and then we'll take a break. Okay. So this exercise is one that I do with all types of writing students that I have. And some people find it fun and some people find it torturous. But it's called speed dating. And basically, what I want you to do is, do we have an even number? Yes, we do. I want you to pair up with a partner, and we're going to do 3 short rounds of this. And you're going to take turns asking each other questions that begin with who, what, where, when, how, or why. And only those type of questions. Any type of question you want to ask the other person, you have to figure out how to say it, how to phrase it as a who, what, where, when, how, or why question. Clear?
Are they just like get to know you questions, or are they related to?
It can be any type of questions.
Okay.
Like how do you get the information that you need to know or that you want to know using only who, what, where, when, how, and why questions. You can ask the other person about themselves. You can ask them about why they're here today, you know,
Okay.
things related to grant writing, anything you choose. But that's your constraint. And it seems easy, and sometimes it's not so easy. So I'm going to time it. The first round we're going to do 10 minutes, like 5 minutes on each side, and we'll do shorter in each round. So pair up. Swivel your chairs. That's probably all you need to do for your first pairing. And decide who's going to ask the questions. Halfway through, I'll say time to switch. But let's just keep it 1-to-1. One person asking, then we switch, then the other person asking. So decide.
Writing this down?
No, you don't need to.
Okay.
So everybody know who's going to ask first? Okay, and I will time you. And go.
I drove from Fort Worth.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Well, I was, what should this be? I started because I just started volunteering with the dog rescue, and they have a need for emergency medical emergency. I'd like to learn how to do that. And well, what is an emergency medical? They're for, so they can pull dogs from shelters that are unadoptable because they've been hit by a car, they have some kind of medical condition. Why are they not being unappealing for adopters? So they depend, so they don't euthanize those dogs, the shelters depend on rescues to be able to pull them and hopefully have the public school treat them.
It still felt like it would help.
The end goal.
What you have for international relief agency, and it still felt like that would be active.
With the rescue that I'm volunteering with, they have a foster program, like it's called Bird Buddies. So they pair up a dog with a foster family or individual, and they do like train our dogs with behavior issues, so they have just like basic commands, that kind of stuff, and then adopt them out.
Do you literally
I volunteered there and I started fostering my salary this time last year, and I started grant writing volunteering 2 months ago.
And what do they feel that with going forward and you being their grant writer, what do they feel they're going to be able to do?
Just rescuing more dogs that are unadoptable from shelters.
That's what do you do? What do you do outside of your
I do technical writing for, it was Dell Services, for their data centers. and they sold their data centers to a different IT company called NTT Data. So I work with their data center team
What
in
is
Plano. I mostly do technical writing related to procedure and process documentation.
They just not want to have to get told what stuff is based on.
Audited annually for their certifications they need. And then a lot of really,
Stuff you gotta deal with.
yeah, because there are and lots of administrative support for stuff that y'all are doing, purchase orders and that kind of stuff.
So you say government,
So,
was it, I mean, taxpayer?
What is it besides the?
You said, okay, if it's.
I haven't been able to Word when I left in Hills. I have a soft spot for those to get a bad rap. So I like that they have to get a more accurate the brain. Plus they're 85% dogs in Dallas Fort Worth. Area shelters are type dogs.
So it's through, so that's why I say before,
Actually,
that's what I was genetically, if they even do it for all their regular, like they want to, they know he would be massive.
Yeah.
They just
Still have to,
continue to run
A
the
lot
way
of renters
they did without.
but I have word restrictions, so that makes it harder to adopt out. It just impacts blanket rules about open bulls, no Rottweilers, no Dobermans, or any dog that I have the past, 30, 40 years has come bad rap. So I just like being a part of setting that straight. Dogs really are individuals. Mean dogs do
it's basically like their own origin, so
yeah,
it's being part of that. That's what we can't measure.
You really do, yeah. There are just a handful
It's still all
of
that,
apartments in
you
the
know,
area that don't have any restrictions.
The person that loves that dog, you wanna know where it's
So, but it's also
The current area is paying for
I do.
parents, and that's why the teachers have what
kids are
they need additional funds for.
Okay.
realize.
Right now, I have,
What is the most, you know,
Well, I know that.
Fort Dallas Fort Worth area?
Okay, time to switch.
I probably don't get through that question.
Well, I just thought that was something.
Your name's Cassie.
Yes, okay, sorry.
Ashley.
why
I am too. I tried to jot.
How is that?
So what are you here for today?
Because my Monday policy is not really special needs child in certain children. It's hers and their
The end of
family.
last year, and we wrote to the that is review grant application
Years
and
support your parents. They have had,
the course of reading years.
they've gone through.
It appealed to me because I have writing skills and I thought this was something I could do.
One of them that
But as this class is going on, actually, in the process of reading, they were
one
fun.
of them was stealing from her, and another one was not even
They
taking
might
care
have
of her
had
son.
a brief
I would want to house
but in just reading it, I know these people may need the money, but they're not making very good case. They're possibly not making a case. Maybe someone doesn't have time, they're just
She
filling
runs
it out, maybe
a website
money, but
for
you know, you see the difference in how people respond. This is the family. It's just the way it is, you know, if you can't sit there and do it, you may not get the money, it's not out of goodness of heart. You know, it's, you know, and whenever it's actually for our committee, I was looking there down groups that might receive $10,000.
say, how can you leave your home? Why
Why
don't you
presented,
And
she's just curious.
I need to know.
It's just curious.
It is more
We let out
treacherous
people
for
before
us
they vote,
to
because the employees would all not get it.
down, for teachers for him, for them to take his or him. Where he wants to be in his life.
Gosh, I wondered if it's one of the really needed money at the center. Fundraising events, celebrities would be involved, you know, and I thought, well, they seem pretty good about it. Other ones, you know, just because people responded, other people didn't have to respond. So I think,
So between that,
there are accusations of people for whatever reason don't have time.
he loves to talk, to really put across all the community, just make it more aware of all these skills.
How did this
You know, that doesn't affect me or he wouldn't put it down, but they have to.
He's not well with his.
Yeah, I mean, it just, you know,
And that's,
they were
part
all,
of the reason why,
you know,
they're looking for funding, because they know exactly for them and
actually some others that are coming in for it, because they had to miss, I think maybe, you know, they should be able to look at the day-to-day sessions, that some people could actually push on all of this, you know, but, you know, it was just interesting, yeah, to see how,
because I didn't want that part.
yeah, do it.
So that's anything that we know. One very say why.
And that's for her, so she has ways to preference.
She doesn't, just started it.
I don't know exactly
already.
what it was. But it, yeah, we just got some of the process. Decisions got made in our particular instance that our parents do in another state
Quite a large family.
wanted to expand volunteer activities to this area, so trying to see how that starts to play out.
Comfortable.
And it's based
How
on
many special needs families does she know of there?
And that's something I need to really secure
security services and
that.
IT services.
But she's very connected into the community because she had to look for.
Yeah, she's
She
part of
needed
the
to have some sort of even if
We've been around a long time here, and then, you know, they're all.
I can't deal with the stimulation of a full school.
No, but it's just, you know, you just.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's been my
She was
sidetrack.
No, it's,
I said,
but it gives her a little bit
yeah,
of break.
see, you know, and then there's communities
Because she's a writer as well.
for tech companies.
So she's had to look into all these opportunities of where to
Supporting
who
people.
will accept and who
And
will
then
not.
actually,
And in that, with all that research, she's found these
actually
families
kind of,
that
no, it was a little bit of
when you go to this school, or you
these
go to
organizations.
So what kinds of services?
You know, they
Okay.
districts.
Wrap up your conversation, end of round one.
Do you have any
All right,
experience
we're gonna do a shorter version for round two, so find a new partner quickly. You might have to get some exercise, physically moving around the table, rolling around the table.
Yeah. It's too late.
Okay.
What do you think about running your
Okay, start, begin.
Okay, so, what is
I will because.
Sure.
What brought you here today?
your basic?
Not represented.
Okay, how long have you been operating?
Okay.
I foster, I've been fostering.
But you're familiar with field
Most of
responsibility.
my children
Yes, yes.
And what specifically are they wanting to use funding for? They've actually got dogs from shelter. They're actually funding
Right.
more dogs from the shelter. Some more space. Well, they don't have the actual space.
Right.
Your running organization. What is the
Oh, okay, so the different communities and more stuff now.
So how much, that was really weird, they did ask me for.
Like it wouldn't just like.
At this point, I'm not a partner, I just want to
Are there so many other organizations here?
So how many grants have they say applied for in the last 6 months?
I've kind of been working in the process of like learning from the first process.
There won't be none. There won't be none.
My mom went to, it sounds like they're kind of looking for grant writers
So like where are they looking for the grant? Is it just anywhere, like individuals, or are they looking at corporations, like dog food companies, you know?
Okay, this round is a little bit shorter, it's already time to switch. It's a switch. Time to switch.
Two.
I work for a Christian school.
I'm on the.
Public school.
Okay.
And so many people think that private school is rich kids and
Every
you have
day.
a lot of money, and that is definitely not the case. We're very and so most of our children are actually, I don't want to say, it's actually disadvantaged. But I would say it's different when it's in a work-based system, because one another, whether it's emotional or difficulties, or academic possibilities. So I took 6, 7, 12 grade math, and it seems like
Money
It's
is so critical. So, yeah, so it's a little bit fictional.
I think in general, and so it seemed like something that we could do to help, that wouldn't be outside or around capability, something that would be easy.
As an auditor.
Okay, so I think right now we have from Heritage. First Monday trade days, have you ever heard of that? Huge giant flea market. Visiting, we're probably between Dallas and Tyler on Highway 20. We have 24 tables while we're out. So recently, I had a parent school back in November because of a disagreement with the board. So just kind of the majority of decisions went with us and kind of split. So we were, and now we're not. They did not want to go 501c3, and we were like, it would open us up to so many more funding opportunities just for the students in the school setting. So
What would I do for later?
So far, we're funding us, and our student tuition is what funds the school too. So,
That's coming up on a year.
technology. I mean, we do have some iPads and some laptops and things like that, but obviously we don't have enough. Teachers would love to have projectors and just different technology that would help us better serve our students. I subbed for a really long time, and then I went to nursing school, and I actually did that for a little while.
I've got so many
And
experiences
so I stayed out with it. And then kind of thought, what's something I can do that lets me be with them. And so I subbed for a long time. Actually, our PTO, President Crumshaw, the school where my kids went and became the principal of the school. And I was subbing for her son, and the opportunity to kind of have her at one of the teachers. And I was kind of mid-year, and she asked me to take her spot.
Okay, end of round 2. End of round 2, okay. We're gonna do this one more time, and this is gonna be a speed round with a special condition. So find a new partner one more time.
Keep on going down.
I think that we wrote it differently. Yeah, they need to I don't know. Yeah, we'll figure it out, yeah.
I
I'll
already.
take it anyway.
So this round is going to be a tight 3 minutes on each side, and here's the special condition. The person asking the questions has $5,000 to give, and the person answering the question wants that $5,000 for their organization, for something they want to do, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're asking the questions, you're still keeping them to who, what, where, when, how, why, but you're thinking like a funder this time. This is my $5,000. What are you going to do to get it from me?
So the person asking the question.
The person asking the questions is the grant maker. The person answering the questions is the applicant. So just give this a shot, okay? Are we ready?
Are we gonna flip after, or are we just doing it one?
We're gonna flip. We are gonna flip. And try not to ask the person the same questions they asked you to help with. Okay, we ready? Let's go.
Can I do it? I'll ask you. Okay. Do you have something in mind that you're thinking, like you will?
Yeah.
Like that you will fund for? Do you have something already?
Yes.
What is it that you're looking for funding for?
I'm looking for funding for emergency medical grants.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh,
Oh, okay.
building for enjoyment.
Oh, okay.
How wide of a population, or do you cover locally or regionally?
How do you think,
My
these funds
rescue
will
pulls dogs from all over DFW.
Right now, we run over
Why is it important to use because there are a lot of dogs adopted out of shelters and end up getting
Okay, so it's okay, the metal spending.
So if rescues those dogs and treats the dogs out. Okay, how is it funded? How would you determine which dogs can be treated?
So how would this technology help?
Or how would the
Really
funding
just to, let's say,
right to the dogs?
projectors,
It would probably depend on
computers.
the shelters and which
Do you
dogs.
already have bids? I mean, you know, cover it, is it
And I
gonna
would
be
love to have some.
not enough, too much?
We're actually wondering whether a medical case of the public could be treated. They feel like if they're not covered for the treatment, they would just go back to shelters. It really means that shelters not like that.
so you think that for instance, you use extra hardware,
And we'll take it from the 7,500.
will it also tell me more features, or do you think just financial ratio?
How will you, I guess what I want to ask you about is you already have vets in place who will work with them or do you have vets in the network already?
Yeah, we do have vets already. I think there's about 6 vets that we use that give us discount rates to the rescue.
Is there a chance you'd have a
How many animals per
It sounds
year
like you actually
on
have,
average, do you know?
access to funds, I mean, if a board.
Or in the past?
I don't know.
So I guess you're able to provide almost one type of training.
For all, about 20 dogs a month. And this is for the specific breed?
Yeah.
Which is about 20 a month.
For our rescue.
Okay, that's kind of what we would do, is us being able to take a dog in because we have a foster family.
It's your.
Okay, and switch. Time to switch.
I don't have
Okay, I'm going to use my mom was telling me about an organization that's looking for a grant. I'm just going to use that one. Okay. Because I don't really have any organizations. And I was looking at this one.
Sure.
And,
Okay,
I'm sorry, we're seeing, okay.
What would you like to get from us?
Well, I'm gonna be initially, we have an opportunity to
help students.
I'm gonna do this up there, so efficient reserve, and they need cars to help families who are displaced, providing.
Just hear about it, cleaned it, and
So I would say that
for
it helps education insurance for automobiles that have been donated, but the car seats insurance is kind of a special thing, loaning out cars to
Population,
don't own cars.
It's within the city,
education
so.
opportunities. We take them out and we
We're
teach them about the
working with
records, which is in
an
there.
insurance company
In
specialized.
In their area, I mean, they live, I mean, they'll live on the
A little
road.
bit of whatever.
You know, in the county. So why
But I
it's
didn't-
important to
Well,
them, why it's important to clean, they teach them about
In a lot of cases,
there's a wildlife.
a lot of the women just
Yeah.
walk around here just like,
You know, what parks and why,
you know, part of the problem is money for paying
It's
to the
premiums
area.
on time, which
Yeah,
Okay.
one to two school
This
districts
is
in
money
the
we look
city.
for to fund the
make
education
their lives feasible, in,
of these.
this is in Collin County,
Well, to
and
fund
the mass transportation. I mean, in general, here, you could be that mass transportation, but just getting around where they need to be, they
More
really
personnel type too.
So mom needs to get to work, kids need to get to school, and so the cars
This one
just
is on
are critical.
Really?
of
south side of
some
even down about
So how the kids on a schedule up and down are just really basic things, and so the insurance is necessary. I mean, it just, we can't afford it, it's law, and
groups that work up through
As long as
up
there's some
the
type
river
of diagnostic test.
we couldn't in good conscience have people driving cars where we're strapped on that, and it's something that we feel is a huge benefit to not just keeping people in the house, but helping
control
them
really what they throw out and how they run off
have as
the
much
money
normalcy
that
as possible,
corporations
live their
don't
lives,
want.
and,
Okay.
and help having mom stay employed, obviously,
Why
helps
they're
us get back on our
and
feet,
why actually
into their own living
circumstances
circumstances,
and
and
yeah,
providing
so
some
it affects the company,
Just through
that
research,
in the whole area.
and our
the
time, we're
research
able
and
to
studies
That's how I
find
put it
families.
into other
So we're talking,
water
there's
tables
some
in the whole
similarities.
area.
sometimes teens might also drive that car, so we're
Try to
talking
do
about
individuals,
anywhere
ethics.
5 adults
So it's that kind of information,
up to 10
funding.
total, including 5 teenagers who have teenage drivers.
How many
So
How,
we're
I guess, how will you, what are you going to ask them aside from
Start off
just the
with
personal
five.
responsibility aspect to it?
for our cars,
Do you want their help kind of just supporting?
we actually currently have 3 on wheels that would
After school.
cover us for
Okay, and wrap up your conversation, please.
Mostly.
And return to your.
kind of making that.
Return to your.
Yeah, they do, yeah, they understand.
Okay.
They, which is nice. They try to get donated cars.
Yeah, everyone.
Some people. Thank you. I saw you yesterday. I was there.
All right, we're gonna take a break in a minute, but before we do, I just want to ask, how was that experience? And did anybody get that $5,000?
Oh, I forgot that.
I awarded $5,000. Excellent. Okay, so did you find that easy to do, difficult
No,
to
it's
do?
hard. It's difficult,
Difficult? Did it get easier as it went along?
yes.
Okay.
More difficult for me to ask the questions than it is
Yes.
for me to answer the questions.
Yes.
Right. So what about, well, other opinions? What was your experience like?
Opposite experience. I mean, I'm not working for a specific group, so I didn't have anything in mind. I just kind of adapted a scenario, but I found it difficult, like just to be asked the question. I had to stumble before I probably would have given what would be the best answer that you would want to give. You know,
Right.
not being coached, not being prepared.
Right.
It could easily just make someone say, "I'm not sure I can give you
Well,
the money." So.
Yeah, I mean, and this is like when you're first starting, especially you're first starting to write about a new project, you know, a lot of times you're figuring out what it is as you're writing about it. I mean, that was always the sense for me. It's like I knew we had an idea, we knew we wanted to do something, we knew this need was there, but sometimes the writing is what helps you figure out what it is, you know, in addition to how you need to pitch it to somebody else. And this process of, you know, like if you're on board or if you're working with other people in a nonprofit, this process of kind of just really bringing it down to the basic, you know, asking each other these questions. Well, what is it? You know, what is it? Why are we doing it? You know, why should anybody care? You know, obviously we care. Like all that kind of stuff can really help you sharpen it and refine it as you sort of go through the process. Yes.
How often would somebody who is grant writing have to do the speaking? Because my whole thing is, if I could live my life on paper, I'd be fine.
I mean, we'll get to this later in terms of like, you know, you have to, you know, shyness is not your friend sometimes when you're trying to get grant money, because you really do need to talk to the funder in some way, in some version, but sometimes you can email them. You know, a personal conversation can just cut through can save you a lot of time, because you can just kind of ask a lot of questions. But, you know, in general, it really depends on what you're going after. You know, sometimes you will have, like sometimes with major funders, you know, I would have a meeting with them about what we want to do before. I mean, then this isn't standard. You're not usually going to need to have a formal meeting with a funder beforehand. But like I used to work for the Texas Organization of Rural and Community Hospitals, and we were trying to roll out a statewide project that had a component in Houston. So I went down and met with the Houston Endowment to talk about, you know, what it was, and not just does this meet your guidelines, but have that conversation about, well, if you did it this way, we'd be more interested in this than that, you know. And those are, you know, like smaller versions of those conversations are common to have with a funder. You know, they're not going to write your grant for you, but this is, you know, something that professional grant writers kind of learn to do, and board members really should do as well, that participate in fundraising, is like building the skills to be able to have those conversations with funders before you even get to the stage of writing a grant when you can. A development director that I used to work for just had this mantra that she was not going to apply for any grants that she didn't already know she was going to get, based on, you know, contacts, conversation with the funder, you know, linkages between the foundation's board and our board, you know. So there's also a sort of level of conversation that goes on that can sometimes, you know, influence what happens in the room when you submit a proposal. So, you know, building these relationships with funders is good too. But that's not like, you know, that's if you're an emerging grant writer or starting, or, you know, your organization is small, those are relationships you want to build, but that's not always a high-level conversation that you're going to start having up front. It's something that you work up to, but you do need to be able to at least feel good about asking questions when you need information that you don't have.
So, go ahead. It's not a blind process. I mean, it's not like you're not submitting, you never submit anything, obviously, without your name on it. So, I mean, talking to people before, it's just part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, in different funders, you know, think about this differently. Like if you're applying for a big federal grant, you need the help of the grant officer to get through it and to know, you know, certain things to do and not to do. I mean, that's their job. There's a person employed to help you, you know, get through this process with questions you may have. You know, smaller foundations and family foundations sometimes just don't like to be approached at all, and will say, well, it's our guidelines, just interpret our guidelines as you will. And those are the trickiest kinds of things, because if you don't know someone on the board, or you don't kind of have an in, or you know someone that's had experience successfully getting grants from them, you are going in a little bit blind, but each time you do that, you learn something about them. You learn a little bit more about whether this is a place that's a fit for you, and things like that. Yes.
So if you found a foundation that you thought would be a good match, would you always, like, and you had not worked with them before, or you didn't, would you want to call and just like have some questions for them, or introduce yourself to them, or?
Well, I mean, again, like this is like an introductory conversation would be based on first your reading of the guidelines and like what questions you had based on that.
Some questions just to contact them, like,
Yeah.
you always kind of want to touch base first.
Well, I mean, this is kind of different preferences for different grant writers, but I always wanted to have a conversation with someone, you know, working for the funder before I submitted, just to ensure how I'm reading the grant line, you know, the guidelines is how they're reading them, that there's nothing, you know, and again, some of this goes to networking and some of the things that a program officer will tell you if they're familiar with you versus if they won't. And stuff like talking about like, well, in this funding cycle, we say we're funding all of this, but this is really what we're focusing on. So it'd be better to submit a proposal on August than now. But you can ask anything you want. You know, I mean, it doesn't, you know, other than questions that are like, please write my grant for me, you know, or that are just too, how do you write a grant oriented, they, you know, they generally, you know, that's part of what they do, communicate to you. They need, because it saves them time too, you know, stopping you from applying for things. That's one more thing they got, you know, pile of paper somebody doesn't have to read and
So you
screen.
could go ahead and ask if it would be a good match maybe, or, I mean, so it would not be
Well,
like.
you can always say, here's what we're thinking of, you know, and I think this is a match, but do you see it as a match? And they may elaborate a lot on that, or they may not, but you can always ask, yes.
So researching other grants they've given, other organizations they funded would be wise.
Yes, yes, and all, all nonprofit organizations, like, you know, at every level, there's not a record of everything a private foundation does, but if they're a nonprofit organization, their tax returns are available on the internet. So you can see who they've given to in the last year, you can see who their board members were.
And you could call, like, if they funded some other organization, nonprofit, and you called them, you could kind of maybe ask.
Well, you could, but
what
you
their
would.
grant was, or, you know.
You would
or-
probably want to be careful about that, because this is also someone you might be competing with in the same grant cycle. It's really more about, do you have a relationship with that organization? Or, you know, also, you know, it can be tricky because you might call them and say, hey, we're thinking of applying this place that you got a grant from for this service, and you could give them a great idea for a grant they could apply for that service. So, you know, it's just like, I would say that's not standard practice, but if like you have a relationship, or if you want to build a collaborative relationship with an organization, or maybe apply for something together, a good way to start that conversation is like, hey, I see you went to, you know, you all were funded by this entity and we're thinking of that, you know, are there things we can collaborate on, or there, you know, but not everybody is gonna, some people will just tell you to go away. Not everybody is gonna say, oh, I'm not gonna tell you about my grant, that's my funder, stay away from it. Yeah.
With the networking, in your experience, have you found that maybe you're talking to somebody and they're saying, no, we really, that's not what we're thinking of. However, here's the person that you can talk to, or you saying to them, well, yeah, it doesn't fit my needs, but I know somebody whose needs it does fit. Do you ever see that connection going on, or not really?
Not so much, because, I mean, sometimes, and again, it depends on your relationship. If you have a relationship with a board member, I think that you're more likely to get that sort of information. Like, that's not it for us, but my friend's on the board of so-and-so, and I think they're, you know, they're doing that sort of thing, you know. Program officers, you know, there is a line, you know, they do consider it your responsibility, you know, to do your research and figure it out, and they'll tell you what they can about their organization, but, you know, there's layers, it's much more complicated, you know. It's complicated, it's situational, it's about relationships when you get into it and you're really trying to raise money, you know. But when you're starting, you don't have to worry about that so much. You really just need to worry about your grant being good and a match and all that kind of stuff. But we'll talk about that a little bit more as we continue here. So I'm going to have you just writing when you come back. How long of a break do we need at this point? It is a little warm in here. I don't know how to adjust the temperature, but I will. So it's 4:34 right now. 10 minutes enough? Okay. All right. 10 minutes. By the way, I have some copies of grant guidelines from different types of funders if you want to look at it this while you're breaking.
With the question time, will there be any time to ask how to charge for this service as a beginner, or is there a different class?
Oh, that's a
that you
different
take?
conversation, but I'm glad to talk to you about that personally. Don't forget the code, yes.
Is there a?
There is a kitchen down the hall that has tap water. I think that's all we have.
Is there a code to get back into the building? Okay.
Not into the building, into this part of it.
Okay.
If you go out the outer door, then you'll have to call somebody to come push the red button.
Okay.
Yeah, the first time I started taking classes here. I need a snack. Were you in a really bright dress yesterday?
I had houses.
Yes,
Yeah,
now I recognize you.
With little
Where
funny
were
lounge
y'all?
shoes.
Where were y'all? Because did you recognize someone else you're talking to that you recognize, or was it you first?
Well, for her, but the other lady over there in the corner, she looks really familiar too. But we were at a program yesterday called WordFest with Tex Thompson.
Oh, okay. WordFest was yesterday?
Yeah.
You know, I'm totally off.
Now we're advertising for next year. It's gonna be March 23rd.
You know, I went last year. I just
Oh, you went last
I
year?
forgot that. Brain was different with that, but yeah.
Well, you know how it is big and everybody's there.
It was good last year, yeah.
They figured there was over 350 people that came this time.
That's awesome. For your nonprofit, have you looked at, for the playground, there's you know, like the park is in Dallas?
No, I'm a northerner. I'm a transplant here.
It's Northwest Highway in Buckner, roughly.
What's the?
It's called Flagpole Hill. Literally, it's like flagpole on and off.
Okay.
And there is, through the junior league, I can't remember if it's split up. If it's just Dallas Junior League, or if it's North Dallas Junior League, or Northeast Dallas Junior League. I think Junior League, they're currently raising funds to build a special needs park at Flagpole Hill. And I've seen the plans for it. They just, I think they're finishing up the fundraising. They'll probably finish it up. They've been fundraising for about a year. But it's the same concept where they're building a separate playground where kids of all needs can come and play.
That's awesome because that's what they're finding out with Lucas. It's called the Lucas Brothers. He has 7 brothers and sisters because it's his, hers, and theirs family.
Yeah.
And they can go to one that's good for him, but the other ones are bored stiff,
Yes.
or they can go to one that's for them. And all he can do is walk around with his dad because there's really nothing that he can
Hey, where
get
is
into.
where are they? Where is it?
They're in rural Tennessee.
No, I was going to go to Scotch Rite, but that doesn't help you. That's your.
Yeah, and that's the problem is because they're rural Tennessee, they're finding out she even has to take for a 2 partial day classes because he does not like to be out of his comfort, his little world. But he is willing to go to school because he likes the school as long as it's for short periods. So she goes two mornings a week, I think, and she stays in that area because it's a long ways away. But she also takes her 2-year-old because they take little ones too.
Hey.
And then she stays in that area and writes because she's a writer.
She gets a little over cream.
Yeah, and I can see the difference in her since, not see, I can hear it in her because she's starting to pour back into herself. Because if you keep pouring out and out, there's nothing to pour out after a while.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and I'm really shocked that she said that there's not a lot of that give and take of, well, I know somebody, because that's everything I do. I mean, here today, 2 people, I'm like, I need your card because.
Well, I've had it where sometimes, and I don't know if I'm great running, but sometimes I've found that you just ask. Some people will say no, but sometimes they'll say yes. And you can follow the rabbit trail. And sometimes it may take you 3-4 calls, but sometimes you can find what you need. Or you might find what someone else needs. A lot of times I found I had to be the one who connected the dots. But as long as it's giving me a little bit of bread.
architects would like to see if there's a way to turn down the AC. There's probably not, but they probably weren't anticipating it being so warm this weekend.
Yeah.
Dallas has quite a few here in the city of Dallas.
Yes.
Some of them, they get real specific, they have to stay within their city boundaries, because we run into them. But some they'll do a little broader.
And the permit that we get, our permits have to be within, we're in city, but we use, facility. Our permits have to be in Minnesota, and you have to, you have to volunteer, and that in a new component, your mission has to provide certain amount of hours. So what we did was go in some of our programs that we offer into doing it in that city, in that enterprise.
And that's where you guys hold your conference too, isn't it? Okay. So I think it was the older lady that was with you yesterday came, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
she came over to us and was telling us about that. That's really cool. I'm gonna read this later, but I'm gonna grab your attention while I'm not taking it away from everybody else. How does a new person, a new puppet get started to pay a grant? Because she was under the impression she could do it with percentage, and somehow that is one thing I know, that you can't do with
Yeah.
percentage.
Well, and see, that's the thing that a lot of even reputable organizations will try to do that. It's terrible. I've been asked to do that a lot, and and I'll say, I'll think maybe they don't understand this is how it works, but they do understand how it works, and they're trying to do it.
She doesn't want to jeopardize because it's so new. She doesn't want to jeopardize
Oh, no.
anything.
But that's the thing,
So she's
you cannot,
listening.
no one will give you money to pay a grant writer unless it's like an extreme thing. One time, Rob Sancho worked for God because we were going to because we didn't have any development stuff. But that's like the most extreme. So, I mean, either, I charge hourly, some people figure out, hey, to go and get this amount of money, like a flat fee. But, you really need to know what you're getting.
And then you're trying to find a balance. But
And now I've got the skills because I've been looking into the background of it and what you need.
I've girlfriend who did that.
I think there's only this last one now. There's only two things I
Except for time.
Well, hers was different. She ended up working through the city of Wake County and
But I've really been better her and she's willing to give me pay
fund that house. So I think it was 3 or 4 years to get it free. And she
Right.
did.
Well, I mean, you kind of like, what is the annual budget of the organization?
not yet because we're at probably in the stages of Grantmaking and saying, well, you do this one.
Well, okay, like if you don't have experience, you just have to figure out what your time is worth, because this is also benefiting you by getting the experience and being able to say everything else for this organization, so.
That's how I got into editing. She was my, her memoir was my guinea pig.
Yeah, so I mean, you really have to look at what the opportunities are, how much of your time it's gonna take, like like what kind of stuff they want to apply for, and, because, like a 5-page proposal might not take any time at all, but a page proposal can take really more time than you think. If they don't put it together, if they don't know how to give you.
I hope so. I will call my realtor.
That's the thing about it.
Can I ask two questions? And just like,
Oh, but I didn't tell you.
because I'm married to an engineer and he wants
So
to
Sally, for
see
you, you haven't had another summer of 12
pay
dollars.
on average, how long does
those kids would be so nervous in Spanish around adults.
Well, I mean,
I don't know if it was.
it's
like,
difficult to give an
It's
average
like that.
because it all depends on them.
But I wish it was
I
just
mean, it's like you can
happy
do what you do,
dog,
but if
because
everyone
everyone
goes back to the 2000 times to get that information, you know.
And I do know she's really on the ball, because I've worked with her before in other,
Do they have other grants
Have
that
you ever
get
wanted like start from? Do you have
or
one? You know, some people like to send
they're,
their
they're just.
language that they can give you?
No,
that,
we have,
You know, like from anything that they've written that you can start
one
from?
of my practice
I'm not
girlfriends,
sure I'm
and
from,
also
because
his
they're
girlfriend,
brand new,
did
because
what?
they have already,
Did
I
our
heard just in the last month,
She
they've
had
already gotten
that was
see, they've
his
gotten
sweetest,
a board already put
nicest
together,
one was one of those was doing her
due diligence.
Well, I have to continue this up,
Yes.
but, yeah.
And I actually.
Sure. I mean, we can even continue this
This
into
is
a
not
public,
like,
yeah,
would
phone
like you
conversation later if you want
So
to.
they sent the dog to training and tried to make it meet. Or
Okay,
at least to make it, you know,
folks.
they sparked it before months. And they called her like 2 weeks in.
All right, so let's get back at it. Please take out a piece of paper or whatever you want to write with, sort of do a writing exercise here. Again, something you may be familiar with from school. Automatic writing or free writing, we just writing, don't stop. Anybody familiar with that? Okay. So, what I want you to do, we're kind of getting into talking about like making the ask, that's what they call it, you know, what's the ask, and making the argument for it. So before we kind of get into this, I want you to think about the conversations that you had before the break, and just write for 5 minutes on, you know, think about a scenario, like a funding scenario that you would have, something you want, something you need, why you need it, and just write for 5 minutes on that topic. But the thing about automatic writing is you don't edit, you don't stop to think, you just write. You just write whatever comes out of your brain. For instance, if whatever comes out of your brain first is, I hate automatic writing, I hate doing this, but I know I have to think about it. Oh, I'm hungry, it's too hot in here, blah, blah, blah. You let all that come out, and then eventually you'll get to the things that you need to get to. But the prompt is just thinking about, you know, funding-wise, what you need, why you need it. Just those 2 things. And just write until I say stop. Don't stop and think about it. Don't edit. And I will bug you if you stop. Are we ready? Go. You also don't have to write in full sentences. If what comes out is a list, is fragments, is just ideas on ideas, just do that.
I'm wondering if she got locked out. That happened to me last time.
I'm gonna go check. When you're ready. Okay, you guys are doing good. I have about 2.5 minutes left. For those of you live streaming, you have about 1 minute left. You're doing the exercise with us. Okay, and grab up the sentence run.
What?
Finish.
Oh.
It is time to finish. Okay. Shake out your arm. We're not used to writing for 5 minutes without stopping. Okay. So, was it easy to get straight to the point, or was it difficult? Did you have to write your way around it until you got to what the need is? Come on now.
It was, well, I thought it was easier, but mostly because I've just done the speed dating 3 times now.
Yes, right. So, yeah, getting clear on, you have to be clear on what the need is before you can write about it, right? So this is just kind of another way, like if you can't do speed dating with someone, you can do this. Can't do it with yourself, you can do this. I use this exercise a lot when I'm bogged down in writing a grant in terms of like just what, sometimes they're so long or they're complicated or the questions are complicated and you can lose sight of like, what is it actually that I need and what actually is it that I need and, am I explaining it clearly? Doing a little sort of, reset, reboot exercise like this can really help you kind of clarify that for yourself. So, in terms of making the ask and making the argument for funding, asking for it is easy. It's the making the argument part that's hard. I mean, asking for it, maybe talking to the grant officer and saying, please give me some funding, maybe that's hard. But, you can ask for, the concept of the ask is completely under your control. You decide what you're asking for, You decide how you're pitching it, how you're spinning it. You decide what you're putting forward. Making the argument is, marrying that to what the grant funder wants to hear from you, or what they need to hear from you in order to say yes. As we have discussed, it's not enough simply to claim there's a need and expect the funder to respond accordingly. You have to make a case. It's not enough to simply say your organization is qualified or your request is worthy. You have to demonstrate that it is. And simply put, to be competitive, you have to demonstrate why you're the right organization or the right person if you're applying for an individual grant, offering the right service or solution at the right time and for the right cost. And this kind of all ties back to the, the fundamental who, what, where, when, how, why questions and how you're answering them. Oops. Well, before we move on to the next thing, what did you write about just now? What is the need? What is the want? What chunk of money would help do something that you want to see done in this world?
For a specific, one specific expense.
Yeah, or what are some of the ideas that you wrote about, or the things that you would try and get funded in in the grant writing career, or if you were to actually go under and ask for some.
That actually made me come up with a lot of questions about, like, do grants usually work? Is it a specific, so it's not really gonna be your ongoing support, it's gonna be more of a specific, are grants like one-time funding for a one-time project? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, they're different. Some grants are one-time funding, some are multi-year, some are renewable, some are not. A lot of it depends on the funder and their priorities. Some people just want to, I want to give you this seed money, and then I expect you to go on and do something else and not come back to me again.
Okay.
Others, other grant makers like to have relationships with a nonprofit where they, make more grants over time as they get to know them better or as their priorities match. So it's not completely one thing or another. And it's not out of the question to get money for ongoing expenses. It's just extremely difficult. Like I was telling, sorry, what's your name again? Kathy, I was just telling Kathy just now, it's like, a lot of, we're talking about organizations that try to fund a grant writer through a grant in some way, and that's just, that's just not a good ask. But, even that, I have gotten funding for that for the Meadows Foundation before. I used to work for a nonprofit in Austin that was going to go under because they had to lay off all of their development staff. And, without anybody to help them raise funds, they were definitely going to go under, and a whole segment of the population that depended on them was not going to have services. So, and that was specifically under a program that was had at the time that was emergency funding for nonprofits that were struggling due to the economic situation in Texas at the time. And we were able to get the money to fund a position, essentially to fund me to do it. But that's really rare, and that's really extreme circumstances,
So if you use it to expand your current program, are you then at that time looking for funding to secure, like for long-term funding to secure it?
Well, you should not think of any grant as a permanent solution to a problem, because grants are always they're always connected to some sort of time frame. A year, a month, a couple of years for a multi-year grant. Funders are always, funders will ask questions like, what percentage of your annual budget is made up of grants versus donations versus other kinds of income? And if too much of it is made up of grants, that can be a bad thing too, because grants will always end. Bella, come on, come back to me. Come back to this classroom. There we go. Because grants will always end, and there's always going to be the question, well, what happens with this end? They like to see that you have a plan, and funders they like new stuff, it's like that's a common sort of gripe among professional grant writers. It's just like, you have to take something old and make it look new, or give it a new component, or something like that, or add something to it, often to get into the realm of being eligible to apply for stuff. And this is where good grant writers really shine, because they know how to kind of bridge that gap. Like I need, we've got to have ongoing funding for this program manager position. Because we've been funding it through a grant and that's going to run out. Well, can you give the program manager new responsibilities? Can you come up with a new project that a piece of that new project is overseen by that person, so you can fund part of that person's salary in that project? It's not creative accounting in the sense that you're hiding anything or trying to put anything over. It's creative. It's creative. Financial structuring to ensure that your organization's needs are met. And again, as long as you're being upfront about what you're doing with regard to stuff like that, that's no problem. Other things people wrote about in terms of things you're trying to or would like to see funded?
Actually, she gave me an idea in the corner there as we were talking, because I had never thought about the educational aspects of caregivers some of the money go towards educating caregivers to come into the home, are you doing this because you think it's easy? Are you doing this because you really want to? Are you doing it, do you have the right qualifications for it? And building an educational structure for these people. I never even thought of that, so thank you.
Right. Well, and you know, requests that help systems work better, enable structures or organizations to work together, or provide some sort of missing link or missing piece are always good in terms of selling a potential funder on the need for that. You know, it's just like this all would work beautifully if we had this one little nugget, this one little connected Lego, you know, that makes it all happen and enables all these other great things. So, yes. Anybody else? An idea of anything?
Technology for the private school I teach. We don't have, like, I told my principal the other day, typically the majority of our students are not academically gifted students. These are students that for one reason or another are not a fit in the public school system, and we do not have all the technological capabilities I feel like would offer them better opportunities that we could serve them better as teachers.
Okay. Well, so in terms of making an ask or something like that, what are the things that you think everybody would want to know that you could write about?
How are we going to track the progress? That these either technologies, or hardware or software, are going to advance the kids, like we need a starting point versus what they're going to do for them.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and really, and starting with who are the kids and why are they, like, why are they not, what makes them not a fit? Who considers them not a fit?
Well, so it's a Christian school, but the majority of the kids were fosters or have been adopted, so they have some emotional issues
Okay.
from their past. And so the smaller class sizes and things like that tend to be easier for them to not get overwhelmed. And we also have some who have learning disabilities, and while they may not be severe, they still, the small class sizes make a huge difference in us being able to one-on-one with them.
Right.
And that would be another reason for some of the even the software technology like text-to-speech or vice versa, so
Right.
that some of our dyslexic students or we also have some who are dysgraphic and things like that, and so that would be a huge thing for them is to be able to talk and have their papers done that way versus writing or typing.
Okay, well, let's get at an assumption someone could have about this type of ask. One, you know, a lot of people don't know, I mean, we talk a lot about schools not having enough resources or that kind of stuff, but a lot of people really can't visualize exactly what that means, you know. They think about maybe, well, you know, teachers don't have pencils and notebooks or things like that. They may assume that any school that works with kids with disabilities would have all this stuff, or that the state would provide it, or, you know, who knows what they would assume. So we really have to break it down in terms of, you know, like who the population is, you know, what your, you know, the good things you're doing working with this population, and where the gap is that funding needs to fill, and like why that, you know, why this doesn't already exist at your school, you know, due to funding, or you're using an outdated version of it, or, you know, like any number of things in terms of explaining why this is an issue for them, it is also an issue for you, and what the outcome is, like what the I don't want to say the damage, but the how it ultimately hinders their progress, you know, and why this request, you know, why this request comes to this funder and why it's not funded through other public means or, you know, private donations or whatever, you know. A lot of times with school stuff in particular, you know, you have to get past a lot of assumptions about who should be paying for things and the realities of who is paying for them and who is
Well,
not.
because we're a private school, obviously we charge tuition.
Right.
The tuition covers the teacher salaries and
Well, and then in your case too, you have to get past assumptions people make about,
funding.
yeah, assumptions people make about private schools. Oh, private schools are rich institutions and they're charging tuition, so why can't you just pay more yourself, right?
Right. I make less than public school teachers make because our salaries are based on tuition and
Yeah.
student population, so.
Well, and this is all, you know, it's like, it can be tiresome, the level of explaining one has to do to really help people understand your situation. But yeah, that's an example.
That's what I was gonna ask, like, including things like videos or presentation material like that, would that be beneficial to something?
Not unless they ask for it. In fact, many funders will say, don't send us that stuff unless they ask for it. Like, when they want to see that is usually when they're giving you the money and you're showing them what you did. But, you know, there are exceptions, but that's why you really have to look at the guidelines closely. Because, like, and if they don't say, you know, I mean, I'm just telling you from my experience, most people just want your proposal. But that's something, if it doesn't say, that's something you can ask a program officer. Would this help? Okay.
I have
Well,
a question.
Yes.
How much of the grant proposal is comprised of an explanation of why you need the funds versus what you would do with the funds and others?
Well, there are different components. There's always a statement of need, but that has to be expressed overtly and indirectly kind of throughout.
Okay.
You know, there's, what you would do with the funds has to be reasonable, appropriate,
Yeah.
cost-effective.
I guess I'm just wondering how much statistics and explanation and facts and all that should you include in your proposal? What would be?
Well, you need to, another exercise we're going to do when we kind of get past this point is kind of like trying to boil big ideas down to smaller, high-impact statements. And it all depends on what their guidelines are. You know, like some funders will say, tell me about the need in 50 words or less.
Okay.
Or they will say, tell me there'll be very specific instructions for how you do this project, what resources will you need and why, etc. Like each section of a proposal tells you what it, you know, the kind of information it wants. But what I'm just hammering on need and fit is because even when you're talking about what you'll do and why you'll do it and why this is the way to do it, you still have to keep that in mind. And you may also have to explain quite a bit about, how you'll do something and why you'll do it this way versus some other way. It helps to have, sometimes if you have a model or how someone in another state has done a successful program and you want to replicate the same thing, stuff like that. Statistics, paper pieces, logos, all that kind of stuff.
How much do you find you or somebody you know needs to get out of their own mindset to get to what the funder will?
Well, you have to always be anticipating their questions. I tell you what, let's get to the end of this and then let's kind of work on some situational stuff in terms of how we do it. As we discussed, grant lines are carefully designed to weigh you in or send you away. Some are clearer than others. Talking to a program officer is always recommended if you need clarity, and contacting them via phone or email is a good thing to do. Things you can learn from them include the high and low amounts the fund will actually consider, whether your project ideas within the scope of what they're currently looking to fund, and if they'll have different priorities one funding cycle versus another. Foundations, municipalities, corporate giving programs, arts work committees, etc. All use different criteria and take a different approach to funding. So they may ask you completely different types of, they'll all ask you a version of, what do you need and why do you need it and why does it cost this much? But they may ask you all kinds of different questions that may not be obvious to you when you're answering them, like what type of information you're getting at, right? The smaller, more local the funder, the more likely that a group of board members or family members for family foundations will be the actual decision makers. With any government grants, there's established formal review process, usually based on a scoring system the reviewers have to follow. This is complex, but it can be good because with federal grants, usually you'll get some sort of feedback in terms of your scoring sheet, and you'll be able to understand why people scored you the way they did, how that added up to getting the grant or not getting the grant. And sometimes it doesn't make sense, and those things can be very revealing in terms of how people are understanding what you're putting out there and how they're interpreting it. And the examples that I have on the table of grant guidelines, there's the Meadows Foundation, there's a Corporate Giving Foundation, BBVA Compass, the Communities Foundation of Texas, and also the City of Dallas Cultural Affairs Committee. And like if you look at the City of Dallas example, they tell you like in the guidelines how it's scored, like right up front. You can see the process that you can, with municipalities, it's kind of easier to see what the process is, even though variables can get into that as well. For all these reasons, it's very important to understand who your audience is at every step of the grant review process. It might not be a decision maker at first, it might be a gatekeeper. Gatekeepers in the grant world come in many varieties, and they have one mission, and that's screening you out or screening you in. Reasons your proposal might not make it out of the slush pile: didn't follow guidelines, didn't follow the submission instructions, you submitted it in a folder when they said not to submit it in a folder. I've seen things go in the trash can for really picky reasons. There's one foundation out of Austin we applied to every year, that Lola Wright Foundation, that funded us for a number of years. And their things were so specific. It's like, don't put it in a manila folder, don't put it in a plastic folder, use this kind of brad, use this kind of, it's just like incredibly. But if you did not follow those, it went in the trash can. Come back. Oops. Here we go. Your data isn't conveying clearly your financials are problematic. Like if you say, I need this for this reason, but, I'll give another example. I used to write grants for an organization that had a huge endowment. That it was a statewide organization that served, schools and communities, and they, wanted to ask for $5,000 here and there to do this and that project without touching their huge endowment, not, understanding that, anyone can get information on, the information on their tax returns anytime they want. And nobody's gonna, if you have $2 million sitting in the bank that you refuse to touch, why are you asking me for $5,000 to do a project? Things like that. Or if your financials kind of don't match in some way. I mean, we can't get into very far into financials today because that's a whole other ball of wax. But, whatever you're turning in for your budget for the project needs to align with, what you're at. It needs to be reasonable, it needs to be what you're asking for, needs to, fit into your agency's budget. If your agency budget is $25,000 a year and suddenly you're asking for $200,000 to do a project, obviously that's not a request that's going to be approved. Or your proposal just isn't competitive with the other proposals that happen to come in during that cycle. Let's do some more writing, and let's kind of look at different things that you might want to say about your organization and how you can do it more succinctly, more clearly, and more to the point. This time, let's think of it in terms of structuring a project that you want to do. First, we're going to do what this exercise is actually called Russian doll. Is first we're going to write the 250-word version of this project. Then we're going to write the 100-word version. Then we're going to write the 25-word version. And through each thing, you have to think about what's the essential information. Because another thing that it's easy to do when you're starting out writing grants is to overwrite. We talked about how sometimes you have to over-explain, but you also have to figure out, what's information that you need to know and what is not so much. So what I want to do right now is for everyone to kind of start working on something. You can collaborate on something if you want to, if you'd rather kind of talk it out with someone. But start working on an idea, and I want to kind of just come around and talk to you about it, and then discuss these a little bit before time runs out. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to get started on it, and I'm just going to come around and talk to you.
So it was 250 to 100 to 25, is that the?
Yeah, just start with the 250 word version right now.
That's what we want, why we want it.
Yeah, just how would you outline a project for funding of 250 words? Don't even think, you don't even have to think about the need at this point. What is the project? What do you want to do? Who's it going to serve? I can also throw some of the 6 essential questions back up on the board if you want to use them for reference. You can also look at some of these guidelines here in terms of reference. Oh, I thought I missed a slide here. Okay. Here's a slide that can help us. Successful grant applications usually employ your aerosols, 3 bills, pay bills, fee bills, and logos. So you're making, you're making an appeal to some sort of emotion, not necessarily sympathy. It can be, empathy, understanding. Maybe you're trying to get a grant vendor excited about a project you can do and its potential, but there's always some sort of emotion involved. Ethos, is there an ethical component to this project? If it's not done, what happens? If we don't have, if we don't serve this community, what happens? Do we have some sort of obligation to serve this community when we do this project? And logos is always numbers, right? Statistics, it's not always numbers, but, logical reasons. Here are logical reasons why you should say yes. Here are the statistics, the numbers, the data that support, the need that I'm telling you is out there, and the fact that this project will succeed if we meet this need. Successful proposals usually anticipate questions and concerns a grant maker might have and address any red flags that can't be completely eliminated. And this is kind of what I was getting at. Every aspect of your grant proposal should convey a consistent argument for funding or proactively address weaknesses in that project, including financials.
Put the next slide up again, please.
Which
one? The next slide after that. Who's the last one? Yeah, I wouldn't write down things I would ask. Whoever wants to, what you're doing.
Sometimes, for some people, it can be helpful to think of grant writing. Give yourself kind of like a lawyer when you're grant writing, You're laying out your case, trying to lay out your case in a compelling way that, enables the funder to do exactly what you want them to do. Say yes. not gonna count your words, and we probably don't have time to keep you strictly to the 250 word standard here, but you've got a longer version, or a longer idea of what you want to say. Start trying to narrow it down. Start trying to narrow it down, to 50 words, to one or two, tighter paragraphs than what you have right now. Keep narrowing as far as you can until you get it to sort of the most essential statement that you can make about what you want to do. 25 words is great, 10 words is awesome. If you can come up with an impactful 10 to 15 word sentence that really describes what you do, you have so much more room to talk about other things and elaborate on that. okay, wherever you're at in the process, let's start talking about this and kind of, we can go around, or if you don't want to share your ideas, that's fine too. But we'll start breaking it down in terms of how we can talk about this, structure this, address issues that could come up. Would someone like to read their long version? No? The second longest version?
I don't mind reading it, I just don't want to always be the mouth here, so.
Okay, all right, which version are you reading? The long one or
The shortest one
the shortest one? Okay,
I mean, just because
that's fine.
cars are the core of family life, especially homeless families ready to stop being homeless. So that's, but it's still vague, kind of everything.
Okay, so, well, what do we know from that? What do we know about this project from this statement? It has something to do with cars and something to do with homeless folks. Okay, do you want to elaborate or read the next longest version?
We need money for auto insurance for 5 recently donated cars to our shelter to assist adults in finding or new jobs or getting to their job, and teens who can assist their parents with running errands.
Okay, so, all right, what questions do we have about this and what do we know? We know that there's a program, a car donation program, right? And is this a project of the organization, or is it the entire Reason Think organization?
They're not kind of making it up. It's a supplement. They received a donation of cars that can't pay for the insurance, so they need money to pay for the
Okay,
cars.
so we're donating cars to homeless people who need them, but they can't drive them because they can't pay for the insurance. Like, this is the fundamental problem, okay? And how would you sort of extrapolate that out in terms of helping people understand why they can't pay for the insurance? And and how you, okay, questions that go to this would include sort of how you select people for donations, why they can't pay for the insurance, how often you do this, and how many, because you're asking for funding to help 4 individuals, right?
Actually, the idea was that the cars are for the use of people who are staying in the shelter, but they're transitioning to permanent housing.
Okay.
It's not that they
They're
aren't
not
getting
for-
the cars yet.
Oh, okay.
I probably
All right.
didn't say that
Yes, that's an
clearly, yeah.
So this expands the reach of the project immediately, right? There is a shelter, there are X number of homeless people that use this shelter monthly, daily, each year, right?
Families, yeah, it's meant to keep families together.
Okay, even better, meant to keep families together. So, families need cars for X number of reasons. Is there another model you could associate with this? It's like, and this may sound silly, but some people might say, well, why can't they just use Uber? Or why can't they just use a ride-sharing thing? Or why can't they just ride a bike? I mean, it sounds silly, but
No, you're right.
there's something important about the families. And why they need transportation that meets all of their needs.
So I wanted to say, cars are the core of family life. That's why I wanted to get that idea, and whether that's the best way to say it.
Well, yeah, I mean, but families use them for going to school, for shopping, for, getting to work, any number of other things.
It's a link to the independence of the parent who needs a job to be able to move out of the.
So a car isn't just a car is independence. Or access to a car is independence. Okay? Anything else you want to say about that? So, you bring it down and then you build it back up, basically. Anybody else?
No more questions. Everything just makes me have more questions.
Okay.
I'm sorry. As you're narrowing it down, I had started with more like explanation of the organization and what it did.
Okay.
More, so when you narrow it down, do you want to drop some of that background for just the need? Like, are you like focusing on just the ask of what you're looking for now, or are you just trying to kind of encompass?
Well, I mean, what we're doing right now is really just getting at the idea and how to express it, right?
Okay.
Different parts of a grant proposal will ask for different components of that idea.
So it was like assuming they already know what your organization
Yeah,
is.
it's assuming you've already gotten past the part where you explain who you are and what
Okay.
you do and why you do
So that was
it.
making it really hard for me to get it down to 25. I was like, why we do this? Back on. Okay.
Is there any part of your sheet you want to read?
I can. It's so I was just using. I used this with my example when we were talking. Can you tell me your name one more time?
Ashley.
With Ashley. Yes, Ashley. When we did the program, the talking with the who, what, when, where. So I don't have like an organization I'm working with right now, but I just trying to think of something. My mom works for a group called the Chattahoochee River Keepers in Georgia, and she was telling me that they need they're hiring a grant writer and things like that. So I kind of, it's one of the things that got me looking, because she knows I really enjoy writing. So I try to use some of theirs, but I wasn't sure like exactly what they need. But
Right.
so I could read my longer one, but it said the Chattahoochee River Keepers is asking for funding for a new floating classroom boat. We currently serve X number of children in the region and educate them on the ecosystem of the river, as well as encourage their own investment and taking ownership and the taking of it, or and ownership of keeping it clean. Something like that. We do this by taking classes in groups. See, I didn't know like all the background of,
Right.
on specially equipped boats to see the river firsthand and to learn about the ecosystem with trained field guides. As our collaboration with local schools has grown, we are unable to currently accommodate all classes, and at this point are having to turn people away. We would like to purchase another boat to continue to meet the needs of educating local school children on the value and impact the clean river makes to the surrounding community.
Okay.
So I did it like if they're asking for funding for a specific thing.
Right. Well, I mean, and really, the entire grant proposal is a story that you're telling, right? And you don't, instead of telling it in sort of one, instead of writing the story and submitting it, you're using components of the story to answer different questions that they ask. So I think that's a nice succinct, this is who we are,
Yeah.
and like this is the beginning of what I'm going to ask you for.
Down.
Sort of statement. Yeah, yeah. So what there's a lot we know from this. What questions might we ask after knowing this information? Are there other things that you think are important to say up front?
How many kids are being turned away? I would want to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you say we serve X number of kids and,
Right.
yes,
But like they're like at capacity,
and what is capacity?
right? What is capacity?
And how many boats do you have already?
What's the cost of your boat? And do you have guides to work on these boats?
Oh, that's the other thing, like how do you make sure you're taking children to the river, how are you gonna make sure they're safe?
I don't know how big
And also, again, thinking in terms of people that might not be, attuned to the issue in the same way you are, like, what is this, like, what you mean, you talk about like what the purpose of the organization is, but what are thinking about the results, like what they actually, what you actually see. Do you see changes in them? Do they know more? Do they gain knowledge? Do they, what are and with an organization like this, it can be really hard to find tangible results other than we took this number of kids on this thing and this is what it is. But you do yourself a favor if you're still always thinking of that. Like how can you quantify what actually happens, what the benefit actually is in some way.
Yeah, it's hard to
Yeah.
quantify value of investment of, but.
Right. Well, I mean, sometimes, like with kids, anything like, kids who do this program experience this, go on to, improve in their grades, have more interest in science, like anything that you can track as an organization, that you can turn into a statistic, is good stuff, especially if you have an organization that's kind of with a mission that is altruistic, but maybe a little hard to define in terms of what the deliverable could be. Other folks, yes.
I promise I won't read the whole thing.
That's all right.
As I was reading it, or as I was writing it though, I kept coming across the word can't, because parents, especially kids, can't do this, can't do this, can't do this.
Right.
So it started into they can't leave their child, they feel like they can't leave their child, they can't leave their home, they can't trust people, they can't get good caretakers, so it came down to parenting special needs children often means too many cans and not enough yes you cans.
What do we think about that? That's an impactful statement. That's an attention grabber. I had an old journalism professor who used to say, like, the first line of your story should always scream, hey, you know, look at this, listen to me, you know, in some way. That does that. And it's okay, you know, it's okay to be creative in your sort of opening salvo as you're writing grants to an organization, and to do creative things that do give a scenario or crystallize the idea or the need in some way that compels them to read on. Other folks? No other folks? Okay, give it a shot.
Okay. Sufferers of abuse are often served by providing needs of housing, food, and protection. The artist, the musician, and the writer are often among those that make up this community. Providing experts in therapeutic arts can provide a means for artists for artistic expression, personal growth, and can assist with healing. Free therapeutic programs of this type are rarely being provided in the southern portion of the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Okay. All right, I think that's a good start. What do you think? What do you know? What questions do you have? One question I would have is how are you providing these free services currently? Like what enables you to do that?
Currently, we're not.
Oh, so this is a proposal to do that. Okay. Okay. All right. So what is it? What are some basic things that we want to know? Numbers proposed to be served. The statement you made about South Dallas being an underserved community, what that really looks like in terms of numbers. Something else funders can get excited about is like the potential numbers of people to be served in an area that has not had service before. So how could you figure out what the potential is for the service and what nugget of that you want to try and serve the need with?
I don't know how to figure out that number. I don't know how to figure out how many of the people that need to be served that are dealing with this.
Okay. Well, you can do things like, census statistics are always your friend. In terms of, you could narrow it down to, this is all of South Dallas. We want to start by serving this neighborhood, this community, this zip code. Or we want to serve people living in this zip code. And you can get demographic information specifically about that. What else?
I want to know what happens if they're not served. What happens to them? I mean, would she be able to go maybe find a couple artists or writers or something that didn't get to do this because they were underserved, and what happened to them?
Well, there are all kinds of models you can use, like, again, like what people are doing in other states, other cities, in Texas, stuff like that can demonstrate the potential of what you want to do. You could tell the story of an artist in Houston that was served by exactly this type of thing in their community that is in some way comparable to the community that you want to serve in South Dallas. Numbers like, use the numbers that organization was able to sort of capture and serve and how they did it. And that's a good way to really help a funder understand what the potential of the project is. This has already been done before, and we know it works, and here's how we know it works. That's always a good thing.
So my question would be, so what does your program do now? And this is something you're wanting to add to something you're already doing? Or are you wanting to work in collaboration with someone else that's offering services to these abused?
Right. Is this a new initiative to you, or is it a new initiative, period?
I think in that area, new initiative period, but I think it would be a good idea to go in collaboration with
Yes.
another, because there are, of course, other organizations that are providing assistance, but
But not
usually,
that type.
but not that type, because they usually don't have enough funding to go any further than, okay, we gotta give them basic needs.
Right.
So I
Well,
think
yeah.
that would be a good idea.
Collaboration is always looked upon favorably, as long as the organization you're collaborating with also is of good standing, does good work, you know, that kind of thing. Piggybacking on their credibility is a perfectly fine and right thing to do.
Because that's where you can
enhancing
find
your
more population to be served, maybe, you know, the domestic violence shelters and things like that. You could pull from them.
Right, you could really, yeah, really talking about how it knits together in terms of, you know, where your services complete something that somebody else has started. Could be a really good thing.
So can I ask a clarification? It's better to give them a model that's already been done, or is it better for,
Well,
I don't know, to give them
That's just one way to
a
do it.
need?
Like if you, I mean, that's just one way to do it. Models can help you demonstrate how you can meet a need that was similarly met somewhere else. The same existed elsewhere, and here's how they did it, and so this is why I want to do it this way. Models can be used in a number of ways to help funders just understand what you're talking about, you know. But you want to pick the right model. You want to pick a program or a service that's successful. Not a world of controversy in any way. Fiscally responsible, you know, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, you can also, like, positioning things as partnerships that will grow is also good. You know, you could talk about how, you know, these are the organizations that we're going to, these are our existing alliances in the community. These are organizations we're going to partner with, and this is part of something that's going to grow. You can, like a pilot project, you could define it as something like that. Demonstration project, we're going to do it here, and then we're going to grow it not just our organization, but in other areas, in other zip codes, to other people, to other populations, however you conceive it. But you just need to conceive it in a way that's not overly grand and, you know, envisioning saving the world right away. Like, you know, think about what you can reasonably do and the maximum number of people you can serve in a year, because you really want numbers speak volumes, you know. Like the small organization I worked with in Austin that had like a $10,000 budget, they served 15,000 kids a year because they were doing music education services at underserved schools and bringing in folks like Rebirth Brass Band and musicians that were touring through town to give concerts and workshops, you know, to large crowds of kids and small crowds of kids. But that's a way that they really got their numbers up, because auditoriums filled with kids 2 or 3 times a month, that adds up. You know, you really need to, in terms of who you're serving, you need to think about everybody that's could benefit, everybody that's caught in this net, and, you know, who they are. So, and in terms of demonstrating the need as well. I mean, maybe beyond the kids that you'll be serving, there are other benefits to your families, your parents, other members of the community, other way people can get involved in this. Okay. Anybody else? One more person want to discuss? Let me just throw the last couple slides up here, just as a sort of wrapping it up, but we can still continue to talk and ask questions. So the five most common rookie mistakes that grant writers make, we've talked about these a bit. The shotgun approach, writing one good version of a grant proposal and sending it out to all types of potential funders without bothering to tailor each one to the grant maker in question. You have to tailor, you have to be specific. It's very obvious when you do that, and they hate it Okay, not reading and following guidelines, we've already talked about that. Missing the deadline, not actually answering the question they ask, answering the question that you prefer to answer instead. Not submitting the right supporting material. Sticky, if they give you a word count, stick to the word count. Request for amounts larger than the funding limit that they say they have. Not doing your homework with regard to the kind of match it is and making sure you're within the geographical focus of the state giving areas. Applying too early, and this is something that could apply to a lot of folks here. Making a request before you or your organization is really ready to have a grant and administer it. Or you don't have enough support or funding to convince a grant maker that you can do it in some way. And we talked about, sort of a way to solve this dilemma is to work with a partner organization and umbrella organization. Assuming too much knowledge on the part of the person reading the proposal. We definitely talked about that today. Just forgetting to introduce yourself, be specific, demonstrate the need. And the last word, shyness. That's the hard one for a lot of people. Not speaking with a grant officer or program staff directly when you have questions and just hoping for the best, right? You have to be willing to ask questions. I mean, you don't have to be willing, but that's how you're going to get the information you need, right? And I can tell you this, that puts you like 50% up in the pile compared to other novice grant writers that maybe submitted proposals that you're competing with. Just the willingness to talk to them and to ask questions is huge.
I have a question.
Yes.
Interested in talking about partnering with another organization. How receptive are other organizations when you approach, especially if you are small or maybe you're just beginning something?
Well, it kind of depends. Anybody that, okay, if you're offering to write a grant and bring them some money that they have to do absolutely nothing to get, most organizations are a little bit receptive to that. But they have to know that, that you're for real, that you can do what you say. So this is something that, it's good to, if you're starting out, it's really good to start developing a good relationship with organizations you might want to work with at any point in the future, just ASAP. So they know, I'm here and I'm ready to do this, and, eventually, I think this would be a good partnership. But there, it's hard to get people are people, and like some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier, there might be reasons someone wouldn't want to partner with you because you are too new, or they may not know somebody that can vouch for the fact that, that you're for real. Or they may just, they may be thinking of things they're going to do, they're touch some of the same areas and just don't want to partner with you so that they can have plausible deniability when they actually go do that project. So you do have to be careful, and you do have to, but I mean, really going to organizations that you trust and you like and who are doing things the right way, just becoming their friend and letting them know you're out there is the first step. I mean, if there's some short turnaround grant proposal and you're like, I want to jump on this and I need a partner, it's still okay to talk to people about it because some people will take you up on that too. You also want to make sure that you can trust them and that the money is coming to them and has to pass to you. So you want to make sure it's an organization that isn't going to give you some crap once they actually get the grant and go, oh no, we decided we're going to keep more of it than we said. Can be a complicated and messy business, this whole grant writing stuff, but it's valuable and it's worth it. And when you get the money, you can do amazing things with it. So it's worth all the stuff you have to learn and some of the stuff you have to put up in order to do it. And it's a great, great skill to have because grant writers being in demand is not going to change anytime soon. Yes.
Okay, so if you're going to do like grant writing, say like on a freelance basis, if you wrote some volunteer, like type volunteer, just do you need to do that to get your name out there?
Well, for someone to,
Say,
I mean,
did
this is a little bit of a different conversation, but for someone to pay you to do it, generally, they're not going to pay you much if you haven't demonstrated that you've gotten some grants previously. So volunteering, you know, I mean, volunteering is a good way to do it without the pressure. It's like, I'm learning, I'm doing this thing for you, just let me learn how to do it, and we'll do it together. Then once you've actually had some success, or just demonstrate that you're a much better writer than anybody else that's going to be writing grants for that organization. I mean, that's how I became a grant writer. I was a program manager and no one was writing grants to fund my stuff, so I just started doing it, you know. So, you know, if you want a career to grant writer, it's a slow build, but I definitely think finding a way to work with organizations that would allow you to grow your skills and have some success. You know, work with organizations that are capable of doing the things that they want to do and financially sound and all that kind of stuff that enables you to have the best chance of getting a grant. That's the way to go. And then some folks are board members that just get thrown into it. And you just got to do it. You just got to figure out how
I
to
threw
do it.
myself under the bus on this one.
But yeah, I mean, you know, it's like everything we talked about today is just like a little microcosm of what it really is. But the main thing is you just got to start doing it. You just got to start doing it, and you learn this stuff as you go. And the more people at foundations you talk to, the more you learn about how they are and who they are and what they really want to tell you. And, you know,